Yesterday, we hosted a gun buyback in this city. And let me tell you, more than 845 guns were turned in. So many people showed up that we had to turn away 150 cars. And it demonstrates that when you allow people to communicate and participate, they will show up. But let me tell you, I do want to acknowledge Art Cronin, because I told Art several times. I said, Art, I don't know if I can make it. My doctors really haven't released me. I had surgery just a few weeks ago, major oral surgery. And I said to him, they're telling me to take it easy. And when they saw me at a few press conferences, obviously there are some people scared about what's going to happen in November. And rightfully so. Let me say to you very briefly, the reason why I chose to be here this evening, because this race in November is so incredibly important. And we all have to participate in this election. It doesn't matter how you feel, you have to do your part. What I can say to you is that we are fighting for the future of the state of Texas. All right, we're going to throw an audible in this. But we are fighting for the future of the state of Texas. We are fighting for our children, for our kids, for their safety and their well-being. We don't want another Uvalde in the state of Texas. And which means if we're not going to have another Uvalde, we have to do our part to make sure that we have the right leadership in Austin in the governor's chair. It makes no sense. It makes no sense for 18-year-olds to be allowed to purchase guns in this state and AK-47s. It makes no sense. Let me tell you why I'm so proud of Beto O'Rourke. When he showed up in Uvalde, he showed a lot of spunk. In fact, for those of us who are Texans, you have to have a whole lot of spunk. And even when they cursed him and yelled at him, he maintained his cool and his grace. That's the kind of governor I want to see in Austin, Texas. Fighting for our kids. This state is a blue state. It is a blue state. And I don't want to talk tonight about whether or not things are going to happen, or if it can happen, or Democrats feeling though we up against a wall or something. No. This is our moment. This is our time. And it's Beto time in the state of Texas. And then lastly, what I would say, I want a Texas grid that's reliable and dependable. Who wants to live in a state where every time it gets hot, people tell you to cut back or raise up your thermostat because the Texas grid is not reliable? Hell, we can do better than that in the state of Texas. But let me tell you, come November, we've got to make it so hot that those in Austin leave and Beto comes in. And then lastly, this is a diverse state. This is a diverse state. We have to stand up for the LGBTQ community. We have to stand up for women's reproductive rights. We've got to stand up for our teachers and our educators. And most importantly, we've got to stand up for our children. Now, I have the privilege of introducing another congressperson from the 9th Congressional District. So let me bring up someone who has been a friend, a supporter, somebody who's been fighting for us, not only here, but in D.C. None other than the Honorable Congressman Al Green of the 9th Congressional District.
Let's hear for the greatest mayor in the United States of America, the Honorable Sylvester Turner. No, that's really not for the greatest mayor. That was for a great mayor. Let's hear for the greatest mayor in the United States of America, Sylvester Turner. Yeah, that's all right there. Friends, I want to give you 23 reasons why we have to have Beto, and these are reasons associated with life and death. At the Walmart in El Paso, Texas, 23 people lost their lives because of a young person having a long gun that is the equivalent of an AR-15. The mayor has said it, but some things bear repeating. We cannot allow young people under 21 to have AR-15 type weapons in the state of Texas. We can't allow it. We can't have it. It shouldn't be done. But I bring this up because I want you to know this. Those 19 babies that died at Robb Elementary, that shouldn't have happened. Because the same governor that did not bring legislation to the floor of the State House and the State Senate prior to the death of those 23 people, that was an opportunity then for him to bring legislation. He can call a special session. He can make sure that this never happens again. The blood of the 23 and the blood of those 19 babies and 2 teachers is all on the hands of the governor of the state of Texas, and we're going to clean his hands in November. In November, we clean his hands. We make it perfectly clear. We won't tolerate this. Too much has been said by too many of us. It is now time for the person that you came to hear. It is time for you to hear from one who can become governor, and the mothers and fathers of babies will know that their children are protected from people with AR-15 assault-type weapons. One who will make sure that we in the state of Texas don't require teachers to do what over 300 men with guns and shields and masks did not do. Teachers ought not be required to go into schools with guns to defend children. Teachers ought to teach. Why don't you say it with me? Let teachers teach. 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 And now, let Beto become governor. Hey, let's hear it for the great one. The one who's going to make a difference in our lives.
happening right here tonight in this room, more than 3 months away from the defining election of this state and of our lifetimes. And it is not up to any pollster or pundit or prognosticator or the politicians who are already in power. It is up to the people of the great state of Texas. And we are going to win because we say that we're going to win. We're going to do the work to make sure that we win. We're dedicating ourselves to make sure that we're going to win. A lot of good people in this room tonight. A lot of folks who are volunteering right now. A lot of people on our team who helped to organize this. But I want to thank the Meyerland Democrats, Art Cronin, this amazing man who's kept the faith and kept up the fight and is doing the work. It's not just those doing this right now in this year at this moment. It is those of you who have been doing this all along, year in, year out, sometimes working in the political wilderness, wondering if your labor is ever going to pay off, if we're ever going to get there. It was those of you who resisted the temptation to despair and to give up and to throw in and to just submit to what is happening in this state. Because you understand that we can do better. You hope that we'll finally get there, but you understand that hope is not passive, it is active. It requires knocking on doors, making phone calls, going out there and meeting our fellow Texans and bringing them in. And it's not just the way that we here in Houston feel tonight. You can see it in the dollars that are coming into this campaign. More than 500,000 contributions in the last 4 months, $27 million, $3 million more than what Greg Abbott has raised so far in that same period of time. Largest group of donors to this campaign, school teachers of Texas. You see it in the more than 80,000 people who have signed up to be a volunteer, to pick up a clipboard, to go canvass their neighborhood and talk to complete strangers about one of the two issues you're not supposed to discuss in polite company, the other one being religion. We are talking about why political involvement, civic engagement, registering and voting will make the difference in our lives in the election of our lifetimes. You have knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors, and it's 106 degrees out there, and in Houston, 1,000,000% humidity, and you never give up. Soaked down to your shoes, and you're willing to talk to whomever it takes to turn this election. You have decided that it is not right that 7 million of our fellow Texans in the last presidential election who were eligible to did not cast a ballot. You recognize it's not because they're lazy or that they lack any love for this great democracy. But when those in power are choosing their own voters instead of the other way around, when they've made this the hardest state in the union in which to register or to cast a ballot, when they've shut down more than 700 growing state, twice the number of polling place closures in the next closest state. And no mistake about where they're being closed, the fastest growing black and brown neighborhoods in America. When you see that line outside of TSU on election day that runs our country, those 7 million who have been targeted for voter suppression, for voter intimidation, who've been cast out, we thought, from our very democracy, we go out and knock on their doors, we bring them in, and they are the margin of victory on election night in November 8th. You all with me on this? That's what it's going to take. And then there's this. They say, that Quinnipiac is the gold standard in political polling. Right after we got in this race in December, they took the measure of Texas, and they found us 15 points down. Well, not only did you not give up, not only did you continue to donate and to believe and have faith and fight and to sign up and knock on those doors and show up to these town hall meetings. You have brought that margin from 15 down to 5 points. We made up 10 in 7 months. Greg Abbott spent millions of dollars on TV trying to prop himself up, drag us down. We spent a total so far of 0 on TV. We did it with the power of people right here in this community, right here in the state of Texas. And look, this is how we feel right here in Houston, in my hometown of El Paso, in the places where we expect to see other Democrats, in Austin, in San Antonio, the Rio Grande Valley, Dallas, and Fort Worth. But I'll tell you, we're on a 49-day push right now, staying on the road for nearly 50 days so that we all can win this and I can become the 49th governor of the state of Texas. And here we are, right here in Houston, and it is only day 13. We started out in El Paso. We drove to Pecos, went to Midland, Odessa. We were in towns like Muleshoe and Snyder, Dumas, where they still play I'm a Ding Dong Daddy from Dumas on the radio every morning at 7:30. The 3 people from the Panhandle got that joke over here. Rest of you. I just want you to know that far too often we write each other off. We take each other for granted. We say, you know what, red Texas or rural Texas or that other part of Texas, that's not us. We're not them. But we got to show up for everyone in Texas, regardless of the differences between us. We can't allow those in power to divide us, to keep us apart, to stop us from doing the great things that we were intended to do as Texans. And I come back from the rest of the state to report back to you what your fellow Texans are talking about right now. In a town hall meeting like this one in Lubbock, I listened to a young father, as conservative as they come. I don't know if he'll vote for us in this next election, but his 9-year-old is going to start school in a week. And he told his kid, listen, that gunman comes in. I don't want you hiding under the desk. I don't want you running into a closet. He's ordered his son to test the cranks on every one of those crank-opened windows to find which are painted shut and which can still open. And his son went into school and found that window. He knows which one he's running to escape. Now this guy tells me, listen, Beto, I'm his Second Amendment as they come. But we got to do better. We got to defend that Second Amendment while still protecting the lives of our kids. And he asked me, and through me, he's asking all of us, how can it be that 9 weeks after those 19 kids and their 2 teachers were shot and killed in cold blood with a weapon designed originally for war, whose high-impact, high-velocity round pulverizes and liquefies everything inside of your body, so that those parents and the doctors who found those kids could only identify them by their DNA or the shoes that they were wearing 9 weeks later, and the governor has yet to lift a finger or call a special session or do anything to bring us together as Democrats and Republicans, but before any of that, as Texans and parents, to make sure that we save the lives of our kids before the next school year starts. What about, he said, raising the minimum age from 18 to 21 to buy an AR-15 or an AK-47? How about a universal background check so that no matter where you go and who you buy from, we know whether you're going to hurt somebody in our lives? How about a red flag law that might have stopped that shooter in Uvalde? How about, and not all of us will agree, but given that that AR-15 was designed for use on a battlefield and not to hunt, not to protect us in our homes, to penetrate that enemy soldier's helmet at 500 feet. Not a single kid in that classroom was wearing a helmet. They weren't shot at 500 feet. They were shot at 5. I happen to believe that no one should have an AR-15 or an AK-47 here in the state of Texas or in this country unless you're at war or in a battlefield. I tell you what, we are in Spearman, Texas, population a little more than 3,000. I go to the county courthouse before our town hall meeting. And on that county courthouse, as we see on most across the 254 counties of Texas, is a memorial to those who have served this country and lost their lives in service. I saw the one name of the gentleman from Spearman who lost his life in World War I, the 15 who died fighting fascism half a world away to defend democracy at home in World War II, the 5 men who were sent off to fight a war that this country never understood in Vietnam, came back to communities that didn't put on ticker tape parades or pat them on the back or thank them for their service, but quietly got after it, raising their families, starting businesses, working to make this a better country by their very presence. And at that town hall, we had more protesters than we had supporters. More folks who told us to go home, that they didn't want us, than folks who welcomed us and were glad that we arrived. But it was hot that day, and the supporters were under the shade of a structure in that park, and we invited the protesters in as well. We said, bring your Trump flags, bring your bullhorns, bring your signs, bring your posters, but bring your questions. Bring an open mind. Let's listen to one another. Let's hear each other out. And a young woman there in Spearman, Texas stands up and says, my entire life, the law of the land has been that I have bodily autonomy. I can make my own decisions for myself, but Beto, I'm worried now that going forward, I will no longer be able to do that, and it might very well cost me my life in a state that has one of the highest maternal mortality rates in the developed world, 3 times as deadly for black women. And she says, what are you going to do? And I'm reminded of the fact that prior to 1973, abortion was also outlawed in the state of Texas without exceptions for rape or incest. But no one rode to the rescue from outside of this state. Nobody came in to save the day. Jane Roe, a Texas woman, Linda Coffey, who still lives in Dallas, her attorney, her other attorney, Sarah Weddington, who grew up in the liberal bastion of Abilene, Texas, successfully argued her case before an all-male Supreme Court, and in 1973 won the right to privacy for women to make these very personal, sometimes painful decisions about their own body, their own future, and their own health care. And when I told her, let's not hold our breath for anyone to come in from the outside. It will once again be Texas women who win the day for their right to make their own decisions about their own body, their own future, their own health care. All Texas women, including one who is here, who has been phenomenal in supporting us on social media, in organizing support from other young people, not just in Texas, but around the country. When some jackass congressman named Matt Gaetz attacked her online, she took what could have otherwise been an injury from that indignity and turned it into fundraising to provide abortion services for women across the country. Olivia Giuliana is right here, raised $2.1 million. Stand up. We are grateful to you. This is an example of what I'm talking about in Texas today. So whether you're in Spearman or whether you're in Houston, we care about the same things. Rolling into Quanah, Texas, named after the last chief of the Comanches. And we don't know if there's going to be 5 people there, if there's going to be 50 people there. Cynthia, close to 200 people come out in Quanah. And one of them is a gentleman that I met back on the campaign trail in 2018. He's a cotton grower. I went out to his farm, met his family, walked his fields. He said, Beto, it's been a very dry season. You know what? You came to my house, you talked to me, we supported you, but we didn't do enough. And he said, so I'm giving you what I can. which was a check for $100, for which I am so grateful. But he said, listen, more than anything else, I want you to know this. Last February, after a lifetime of service to this country, to my community, to our state, providing the fiber that provides the threads that are on our backs tonight. Last February, I found myself freezing in my own home, not sure if I or my elderly wife were going to make it through the night, reminding us that more than 700 of our fellow Texans lost their lives in the energy capital of the world. An 11-year-old boy in Conroe, his mom unable to pile enough blankets on his shivering body, he freezes to death. A 75-year-old Vietnam-era veteran who could no longer charge his oxygen tank at home because the electricity didn't work, so he takes it out to his truck where they find him dead of hypothermia the next day. People who Gene Wu have told me burned up in their apartments as they put fire to their furniture, trying to keep from freezing to death. Or the little girl who died next to her mom of carbon monoxide poisoning in their garage. They didn't know anything else to do for one another. To add insult to injury, our governor pegged the price of electricity at its maximum rate, not for minutes, not for hours, but for days. Those pipeline companies, CEOs, and energy traders traded gas at 200 times the going rate, made $11 billion over 5 days, the largest transfer of wealth in Texas history. And then he stuck you and me with the bill, $45 a month more on average. We call that the Abbott tax here in Houston. We call that the Abbott tax in Quanah. We call that the Abbott tax going forward, so every ratepayer knows that they are paying it. He stands up and he says, we deserve a governor who's going to connect our grid to the national grid, who's going to make sure that we winterize and weatherize the grid that we have, and who's going to get those $11 billion back for us and give them back to the ratepayer in the state of Texas. They feel the way that we do in Quanah, Texas. In Bowie, we invited in a protester who had a Greg Abbott sign. And Cynthia, as is her wont, gave that protester the microphone to ask the first question. You know what she asked? She said, hey Beto, I'm a retired principal. And I find myself back in the classrooms now as a substitute teacher because so many thousands of educators have left the profession so far. You all know why. On average, in our communities, a teacher's underpaid by $7,500 against the national average. In Bowie, it happens to be $16,000 underpaid against the national average. She's working a second or a third job just to make ends meet, to fund her primary goal, which is to unlock that lifelong love of learning inside of every kid in front of her in that classroom. Furthermore, she's told which version of history she is allowed to teach, or asked to turn in the parents of a transgender child for child abuse. She has to put up with a high-stakes, high-pressure, standardized test. So what we told her, listen, we're going to make sure that we pay every teacher enough to only have one job. We're going to fund the retirement of retired teachers, a cost of living adjustment every single year. We're going to get this threat of CRT persecution out of your life. And we are going to cancel the STAR test in the state of Texas so you can focus on those kids. We're going to respect teachers going forward. In Midland, Odessa, just like in Houston, Texas, they're focused on energy. Every person I met, whether it was at the town hall, using the bathroom at the gas station, walking into a restaurant, they're working energy jobs in that community. And they asked me, hey Beto, I know you're running for the highest position of public trust in the land. Can we count on you to protect our jobs? Can we count on you for the future, for our kids and grandkids? And here's how we answer that question. We are so damn proud of those of you who work in the energy industry, who have secured our energy independence from the rest of the world. For as long as I am driving that Texas-made Toyota Tundra that burns gasoline, I want these resources to come from this state. I want the jobs to be right here in the state of Texas. I want our economy to thrive because we're doing it right. But I also want to acknowledge that no state understands the consequences of climate change better than this one. You've seen historic drought in the Panhandle, North Texas, and East Texas for that matter. And I don't have to tell you, when the skies opened up here during Hurricane Harvey, more rain dumped down than has ever been recorded in the history of North America. And we know that not all people are experiencing this equally. Some communities are on the front lines. They bear the brunt of this, the deaths, the sicknesses, the premature births of their children because of what they're exposed to right now. We owe them something better. So in addition to leading the world on energy today, I want us to lead the world on energy tomorrow. That means investments in hydrogen, in wind, in solar, in geothermal, in battery storage technology, and following the lead of our brothers and sisters in labor, the AFL-CIO has written a climate jobs plan for Texas. More than 1 million high-paying, high-value, high-skilled jobs in these areas, including investing in energy efficiency for a building like this one so that it's not 85 degrees right now. It's something that we can all live with. We want to bring the best jobs to the best state. We want them to be energy jobs. We want them to be the energy jobs of the future. It's important in Midland. It's important right here in Houston. It's important for Texas. We're going to work on that one together too. And then lastly, I was just in Port Arthur. And they have a story that is very similar to the one that you have told me when you have graciously and generously told me what you've been through over the last 5 years. They say, though our county in Jefferson was hit harder than any other during Harvey, we have yet to see the resources come down from the federal government or the state government. And for some reason, these Republican represented counties further inland that didn't suffer the level of devastation and death that we did seem to be getting the lion's share. All they say, and this happens no matter where I go in Texas, is that they want their fair share. They want to be treated just as equally as anyone else, regardless of the color of their skin. And it's one of the most diverse counties in America. Regardless of their income or voting history, they want to make sure that they're able to succeed in life, live to their full potential, fulfill their promise that there's a state government that is with them no matter whatever differences there are between us. I tell you folks, Greg Abbott is sleeping on Texas, and he's sleeping on rural Texas, and he's sleeping on these communities where he thinks the votes are already in the bank. We're showing up for people, we're fighting for people, we're listening to people, we're learning from them about what's most important to their community, and then we are fighting for their vote until we earn it. So whether that's here in Houston, or Port Arthur, or Quanah, or Muleshoe, or any of these communities we've been to, folks, I tell you what, I feel like we're going to win this election. But it's going to be up to all of us. Not just some of us, and not just one of us. There are a number of amazing volunteers in yellow vests at the back of the room. If you all could raise your hands. They have clipboards. They will sign you up to knock on doors. Now listen, we're going to put some TV ads up at some point, and I hope they're going to be brilliant. But some folks may not see them, or you may have developed an immunity to political advertising. You may or may not follow us on social media. We may not find you in some way that is broadcast to millions at a time. But if you're willing to show up at someone's door, eyeball to eyeball, face to face, human being to human being, in the year of our Lord 2022, after so much division and polarization and hatred, you offer yourself to that person and you invite them in to this democracy. They'll never forget the conversation, because with your own words, from your own heart, you're going to tell them why you took the time to show up for them and why you want them to vote in this next election. Number one reason given by those 7 million who did not vote in 2020 was that no one ever asked them to. Ladies and gentlemen, when we ran together in 2018, we only lost by 2.6%. We are building on the base of what we built together in that year. All the voters that we met, we still have those relationships going. All those volunteers that we worked with, they've re-upped and they brought their friends and family, little sisters and brothers as well. If you will commit to the work ahead over these next 3 months, if you will pull these voters in with me, I guarantee you, we are going to have the night of our lives on November 8th. We're going to set this state on the right track. We're going to be so damn proud of one another and what we have been able to achieve. We're going to fight for one another. We're going to make the good things happen. We're going to stop this chaos, this cruelty, this corruption, and this incompetence that is Greg Abbott in our state government today. Are you all with me? Well, I am with you. I look forward to winning this with you, for you, and by you. Thank you for coming out in my land tonight. Let's go Houston. Gracias, Cynthia. So, just as we did in these communities that we just visited over the last 13 days, for those who want to stick around, we're going to take some questions. Turn the microphone over to you. Find out what's on your mind. Listen to and learn from you, because one quick thing before Cynthia recognizes our first person. Because no Democrats have been showing up in Muleshoe or Pecos or Snyder, or Dumas, or Pampa. No Republicans have to show up there either. There's no contest in November. There's no accountability for those who are already in office. These folks are functionally unrepresented. Let us not, those of us who are Democrats, and I hope we have Republicans and independents here with us tonight as well, but those of us who are Democrats, let us not make the same mistake of sleeping on Houston or thinking that we have this community in the bag. We must fight for and earn every single vote in this county, and that's what we plan to do. Ms. Conner.
Okay, we have a lot of folks here, a lot of hands up, so I would just ask to please keep it to one question so that we can get to a lot of people.
Our opponent.
Thank you very much, Beto, for coming out. You're a man of your word, and he came to my house, by the way, after we flooded in Harvey, knocked on my door, came from El Paso to Houston when my own congressman didn't. So thank you for that, Beto. So here's I've got a question. Question is, I was just talking to our Westbury civic leader, Becky Edmondson, who's here, and we were talking about how they're putting up wooden stakes up for the power out here. And this is a thing all around Houston. After Ike, they said they were going to stop doing that, and we're going to look into burying the lines. I mean, we're right here on the coast, and it's July, right? So what would you do as governor to fix this situation where we are more secure and safe during storm season, much less winter in Texas?
Art, thanks for coming out. I want to make sure that these billions of dollars that Congressman Al Green and Sheila Jackson Lee appropriated to come to Texas to do this kind of work actually finds a home in these communities. To see that the state of Texas has actually withdrawn these resources recently, I don't get it unless it's a punitive measure against a Democratic majority community. Maybe there's some other answer out there, but we do not lack for need. Whether it's these lines that are being run right now, which are more vulnerable for the next man-made or natural disaster that comes along, or the folks that I've met in communities like Kashmir or Trinity Gardens, whose homes are still not rebuilt from Hurricane Harvey, and then were flooded again during Hurricane Abbott when he couldn't keep the power on. Their pipes froze and then burst, destroying not only their pipes, but their floorboards, mold running up the walls, all over the ceiling. We do not lack for need here in this community, but we also do not lack for resources in this state. It's a $2 trillion GDP, $250 billion biannual budget. We just need to make sure that the resources go where the need is right now. We make sure that without favor or prejudice, we help every single Texan, no me importa, does not matter for whom they vote, whether they're even registered to vote, what the status of their citizenship is, if they are naturalized, if they're 8th generation, or if they became a permanent resident yesterday. We're going to be there for one another going forward, and that includes everyone here in the city of Houston. Thank you, Art, for asking. Appreciate it.
Okay, to your right.
Okay.
I'm over here to your right. Keep going right here.
Got it.
Hello, Mr. O'Rourke. And hello, everybody here. My name is Elizabeth Weller, and if you don't have time to hear this whole thing, you should probably just Google me real quick and you'll get all the details of my information. I am a graduate student of political science at the University of Houston, and despite my intense interest in politics, the issue of abortion was never at the highest echelon of importance to me. I know, I'm a woman, it should have been. But the thing is, I was a little bit more entertained with other policy issues. But this year, abortion became my #1 issue to focus on. And it wasn't because I was in a position to want an abortion, but because I was in a position to need an abortion. My husband and I were pregnant this year. And some of you who are looking at me are probably, well, that woman doesn't look pregnant at all. Well, that's because on May 10th, my water broke at 18 weeks and 6 days. I was in a position to where I had to go to the ER, and there I was told that I had 2 options. I could continue to be pregnant. My due date was October 5th, mind you, and this happened on May 10th. So I could make the decision to continue to be pregnant and remain in the hospital until October 5th. I don't know about you, but I can't afford a medical bill that long. They told me that if I chose that option, the odds of my baby's survival making it to October 5th were nearly 0%. And in the event that my baby made it to the week of viability at 24 weeks, my baby would be born with horrendous physical disabilities that would have plummeted her quality of life to the point where if this were an animal that were being born, everybody in here would have not a dry eye and would say the animal needs to be put down. I had to make the difficult decision that night to say, you know what? There is no way my baby girl is going to survive because when my water broke, I lost 100% of my amniotic fluid. For those of you who don't know, amniotic fluid is not necessary for the life of your baby. It is only there to help development of the fetus. The only thing that was keeping her alive was the power of my body generating her heart. The other option was understanding the consequences of the first. I could elect to terminate the birth. That night, my husband and I mourned over the death of our baby girl, Theodora, and decided that we had to terminate her life. They told me that now that my amniotic sac had burst, I was open to infection. And the only thing that I needed to do now was opt for antibiotics, and so I did. The next morning, my doctor came in to go ahead and make the certification that we were going to go through with this procedure. She went to her higher-ups to get the clear on the operation, and the administration of the hospital told her, no. On paper, your patient has opted for antibiotics, and it fought off the early symptoms of the infection that we need to prove that she's in a position to get an abortion. I was then told that I could stay at the hospital, neglect antibiotics, welcome an infection, but there was no certainty that I would go into the process of delivery. The option was to check out of the hospital, go home with the parameters set that when I began to have yellow discharge, fever, chills, that was the time that I needed to run to the ER. I will spare you the details of the mental and emotional anguish that followed the next 4 days. But on Friday, I believe it was May 13th, I woke up hearing gas in my abdomen, and it was a very high-pitched noise. And in that moment of grief, my brain told me that that high-pitched noise was the sound of my baby screaming for her life because she was dying. That freaked me out, naturally, and I called my doctor and begged her to get me in. to see if she still had a heartbeat, because in my brain I knew my baby was dying. There's no way she still had a heartbeat. I swear I heard her scream, but of course that's just irrational. It's out of the realm of reality. They got me in, and it brings me immense shame to say this. They told me she had strong heartbeat still when I cried. Because I knew my baby was suffering inside me, and I knew that I was suffering mentally and emotionally, having to cope with the fact that I'm losing my baby. And the state of Texas is telling me, you have to continue in this state, this mental and emotional state. Not just me, but my husband dealing with the fact that he's losing his firstborn baby. Then and there, my doctor told me that she called around the state of Texas, even our medical center in downtown, one of the more liberal medical centers in the state. And they said, I'm sorry, doctor, but we can't touch our patient. We have patients just like her. We're not touching them either. They're sitting in our rooms and they're waiting on an infection. It was right then and there that me and my husband decided, okay, we've got to look at flights. We got to go to Albuquerque, we got to go to Denver, we got to go somewhere because nobody in this state is helping us. My doctor then told me, well, wait a minute, before you make that decision, understand that you can go into labor on a plane, in a car. What happens if you bleed out? We don't know what you're going to be like when you go through labor because this is your first birth. What are you going to do? I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. So she said, let me just tell you one thing. I do know that the hospital is forming together an ethics committee to address this case because it's complex. But I have to be honest with you, I don't think it's going to result in anything because the hospital basically made it seem they were doing it to protect themselves from a lawsuit that I might bring. So she had no hope that the ethics committee would result in anything. As we were leaving the clinic that day, I felt a gush come out of me, and that's when I realized that the infection had begun. They sent me to the ER, and even when I was there, the charge nurse was looking at me as if I was insane for what I was telling him. Because everybody knew my baby was going to die, and yet they made me go home, get sick, and suffer for 4 days. It just so happened that the ethics committee actually had a very patient-forward doctor, and they concluded that the hospital was acting outside of their values, and they found the hospital acted unethically. And so they were pushed to give me the procedure. They had to induce me that night. I am a native Texan, and I was born and raised in this state. Having lived my entire life being promised and told and advertised that this state was the place that would never step into our lives to tell us how to live and what options we chose to live, and yet they told me I could not save my baby from suffering. And you may sit there and you may ask, well, how do I know my baby was suffering? Well, before I was induced, the state of Texas mandates that nurses give you a pamphlet to inform you that even though you're about to make this decision, you should feel, and I'm sorry for my French, shitty for what you're about to do. The entire pamphlet is to make you feel guilt for what you're going to do. And there are 3 points in there that just scream out hypocrisy, but I'll spare you the first 2 and I'll go to the last. They told me that my baby would feel every amount of pain in this procedure that I was getting. The state of Texas wanted me to know that. How was my baby not suffering when the amniotic fluid that was put there to help her, to secure her, to save her, that sac was now wrapping around her body, and the pressure of my body was folding in on her, around her. I'm going to end with this. Most of you in here are familiar with Christianity, and you are aware of the 4 horsemen at the end of Revelations. Well, I'm going to tell you this. Governor Greg Abbott, Attorney General Ken Paxton, Representatives John Cornyn and Ted Cruz, they're my harbingers of death. And they are going to continue to be the harbingers of death for women who will go through what I am going through, and who are going through what I'm going through. I said earlier, Texas has always advertised that they were going to be the state that never told you how to live. That's what I was always raised up on. Well, I ask you, everybody in this room, do you recognize your state? Because I don't. I'm up here and I'm angry and I'm seething, and I knew that as a political scientist, that when this happened to me, that it was my moral obligation to say something about it and to scream and to make the state get down to its knees and apologize for what it did to me. I am angry because the saying goes, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. The Supreme Court scorned millions of us. We cannot sit down. We have to make sure that that guy up there, he wins this next election. I block-walked for you in 2018, and I'm going to make sure you get elected this time. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I gotta tell you, what you just did was so courageous and so powerful and so necessary for all of us. And what you all did, what everybody did here by listening. And I've been at, on a box like this, or on a stage, or standing on the floor, more than 1,000 of these. And if anyone speaks for more than a minute, people get uncomfortable. Folks may start to chatter, look at their phones, get up and walk away. Everyone here was totally focused on you. You've invoked something that we, unlike almost anyone else that I know of, or anything else that I know of in the animal kingdom, possess this power of empathy, where even though I'm not a woman, and I'm not physically capable of going through what you just went through, you telling me this story, I can begin to imagine what that was like for you, and the grief that you were feeling, and you even admitted shame and guilt at one point. And all of this seemingly out of your control. You without agency as a woman in America in the year 2022. I'll tell you, every single one of us is going to carry this story with us. And to everyone who receives the broadcast, for the phones that are beaming this out, or the television reporters that are going to broadcast this on the news. And I think that's going to invoke not only the empathy, but the action that you call for from our fellow Texans. Because regardless of whether they're Republicans or Democrats or anything else, they're going to care about you and every other woman in this state. They're going to rise up, do the right thing, vote like their lives and your life depends on it, because they do, and win this election. It's the only way through. Thank you for being here. My hero. Thank you.
To your right.
Hi, Beto. My name is Aaron. I'm a high school senior in Cypress, Texas. My question is that in this day and age, politics is so reactionary and it's so polarized that whenever I do try to reach the other side, which are mostly Republicans or Libertarians, it's always met with an angry response. And I guess when we've all dealt with that angry response, that polarization that makes all of us upset because their views are usually very upsetting to us. So, and you have shown yourself to be a master of being bipartisan, getting people to agree. So how do you say that us youth should get the other side to come to a common agreement?
Thanks for being here. Thanks for asking the question. If it's not too personal to ask, are you going to be 18 before November 8th? No, okay. But you know people who will be. And the friend right next to you, first-time voter, thank you for being here too. But even if you can't vote, you're going to work to make sure that we win. You can talk to people who can, and your question's a great one. How do I talk to those who haven't already come to the same conclusion that you have or that I have? I'll tell you what, we got to listen to and be with the people without judging them or writing them off and inviting them in. So we were in Pampa, another one of these cities, where for our American history or music fans, this is where Woody Guthrie bought his first guitar and wrote some of these American classics right here in the state of Texas. So there were a lot of folks who came in opposition, wearing the Trump shirts and wanting to get in our face and yell things when I was talking. But I said, listen, we're going to give you the microphone. You can ask any question that you want to ask. I want to make sure that I hear what's on your mind. I noticed that a number of them were veterans. And we had this conversation about the Vietnam era, who came back to our communities, even though we sent them to a war that we never fully supported them or helped the rest of the country understand. And they came back not to ticker tape parades, but shrugs of indifference and sometimes just outright hatred. But what that Vietnam era generation has taught all of us is that because we did not respect them and did not treat them and give them the care that they deserved, we waited 40 years for the Agent Orange that they had been exposed to be treated as a presumptive condition for the cancers that they were dying of. 40 years for the wealthiest country in the world, and put them in that danger in the first place to acknowledge its culpability, to make sure that they were okay. And as you all who have been following this have just learned, there was a wonderful toxic burn pit exposure bill in the United States Congress that had full bipartisan support, that was going to be passed not only because of the Afghan-Iraq vets, but the Vietnam era vets who stood up on their behalf and fought them and said, we're not going to wait 40 years for you to get treatment for the toxic burn pits that you have been exposed to. I still don't know what happened to derail that deal, but predictably Ted Cruz was at the center of that, right? So we talked about what we could do in this state, setting up our own toxic burn pit registry and using the resources of this very wealthy state to pay any price, lift any burden for any veteran who needs to get that care. And we were getting nods of assent, people clapping their hands just like you are. They said, hey, you know what? I may not like this O'Rourke guy on this issue, or I may believe that he's the socialist that Greg Abbott told me he was, or he's going to do all these awful things. But you know what? He's talking some common sense here. And now that I think about it, Greg Abbott's never shown up to Pampa, Texas and taken my question and listened to me and learned from my community. So by going there, we were able to fly under the radar of Fox News and the misinformation industrial complex that pours into these communities on every hotel, lobby, TV, or gas station TV, or really anywhere we go, and connect directly with people. Same thing in Hemp Hill yesterday. Guy in a Trump hat, Trump shirt at the end of the meeting is giving Cynthia Cano a big bear hug because we found some common ground and he loves the respect that we've shown. So I just ask you this, for the Republicans in your life, don't write them off. Don't sleep on them. Don't judge them. Don't count them out. Ask them what's most important to them. And if it's being able to see a doctor because they're uninsured, say, hey, Beto wants to expand Medicaid so you can see that doctor. If it's making sure that our teachers are paid a little more, Beto's the one guy who's got a plan to do it. Worried about going into a school with AR-15s, he's got a common sense bipartisan solution to get that done. He's going to bring people together. While we have a governor right now who wants to divide us by our differences, and anytime we ask him a legitimate question, hey Gov, why haven't you fixed the grid? Look over there, there's Mexicans at the border. Hey Governor, how come you haven't fixed Child Protective Services? And 100 children have died in the custody and care of the state of Texas just over the last year and a half. Watch out, here comes CRT. You ask him about anything, and the next one is transgender kids, right? He wants to scare us and divide us and define us by our differences. We want to come together. We can't just say that, we've got to act it. So I hope that you will be an ambassador for this campaign by doing the same thing in your school and in your community in Cypress. Thank you.
Okay, to your right, we're going around the room.
Here we go.
I have time for 3 more questions.
Hi, Beto. My name is Sydney.
Hey, Sydney.
I had a quick question. Out of 150 members of the House of Representatives, only 39 of those people are women, and only 16 are Black. What is the initiative that you'd like to put in place to help more Democrats, but more specifically young Democrats, continue to run for political offices and run a lot of these uncontested seats against Republicans?
Right on. Thank you for asking the question. First of all, Cynthia, We want to make sure, or a volunteer on our team gets your contact information. Here we go. So that we can see the office that you're interested in running for and make sure that we all get behind you, right? First order of business. Second, you got to see your county commissioner, your mayor, your city council member, 2 members of Congress, Jean Wu and other state representatives are in the room tonight as well. Janet Duddy, who's running for statewide office as our next comptroller. But I want to tell you what we all did in 2018. Though we did not defeat Ted Cruz, we absolutely transformed politics and what is possible in the state of Texas. It was the largest turnout since 1970. First time a Democrat had won the 4 major metro areas and surrounding counties since LBJ did it in '64. 12 new state reps replacing the Republicans who'd served in those positions before. 2 new members of Congress, including Lizzie Panel Fletcher, right here in this community, flipping control of the House of Representatives. And the kicker to your question, right here in Harris County, 17 African American women elected to judicial positions, changing the face of criminal justice in the most diverse city in America. So join this effort. Let us get behind you in whatever you're going to do. And by working together, we're going to make that change that you just described. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate that.
To your right, Beto. Here we go. More right.
Here we go.
Hi, my name is Dr. Amanda Richter. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist here in the state of Texas. This is my beautiful, non-binary child. I work exclusively with trans youth, and every single day I have parents who are terrified that I am going to have to call CPS. My question for you is, what can you do to stop this madness? There is nothing wrong with these children at all, and my child deserves to live.
Dr. Richter, thank you for being here. Again, extraordinary courage to come in front of everyone and tell a story that brings us all into your life. It's no longer a headline. It's not a talking point. It won't even be an effective scare tactic from the governor once we meet you and your child. I was at the State House last legislative session, and I'd driven from El Paso 8 hours to testify against the new elections bill that was being proposed by the governor and the Republican majority. The same bill that eventually passed and made this the toughest state in which to vote or to register to vote. But the committee that was hearing that testimony was also hearing testimony about barring transgender kids from playing on their middle school sports team. I didn't even know that this was a crisis in Texas. I thought we had real problems, but apparently that was the most urgent issue of the day. And I listened as parent after parent, and in some cases child after child, went up before the most powerful people in the state of Texas, and in the most gracious and generous and patient way possible, testified about what even the introduction of this bill does to their kids, about their sense of self-worth, about whether they're in the right place, in the right state, but maybe even on the right planet. And they talk about something that's really hard for us to discuss, and I don't know how to touch lightly on this, but the level of self-harm and suicidal ideation that we see among a population that is constantly scapegoated and vilified and attacked by the most powerful in the land. And I mentioned patience because these families who've driven in from Corpus Christi or Texarkana or Wichita Falls to come to the Capitol had done it the previous legislative session and the session before that as well, to explain to those representatives and senators just what this was doing in the hopes that they could break through and convince them and compel them that there had to be a better way to address this. Well, there wasn't a receptive audience on the other side of that microphone, and they proceeded with this very hateful legislation, leading to what you just alluded to, the governor essentially issuing a search warrant for the parents of any transgender child to accuse them of child abuse. And if that accusation is sustained, I just want to make sure everyone understands the consequences. Not only is that transgender child who those parents have just loved to try to help them through navigating a transition and a period in their lives that is already difficult to begin with. But they're going to take every other kid away from them that lives in that same household and turn them over to CPS, where tonight in those CPS offices, kids will be sleeping in the hallway, under the desks, atop the tables, because for the last 7 years, we have so badly underfunded and mismanaged that program. You ask, what are we going to do? Number one, we're going to speak with pride about you and your child and your place right here in the greatest state and the greatest country on the face of the planet. Whatever you all do, whatever genius you reveal over the course of your life, we want it to happen right here in the state of Texas, because this is a big state and it is big enough for every single one of us. Our dreams, our aspirations, our ambitions, the work that we're willing to put in order to achieve that. But I want to make sure that we're not just on the defensive. And I don't know about you, but I'm kind of sick and tired of Democrats always being on the back foot or defending things or hoping it's not going to get worse. Or I really hope those Republicans aren't going to do these awful things that they've talked about. They've told us, ladies and gentlemen, what they're going to do. Clarence Thomas, in that consenting opinion to the Dobbs decision, says that contraception is on the block. Following that is same-sex intimacy. And that means they're going to revive the sodomy laws in the state of Texas, and then following that is marriage equality. A reminder to all of us, progress is not inevitable. No victory is ever final. The fight, just to make sure we're all clear and wide-eyed about this fight is never over. They have been fighting it for the last 49 years, plus they're never giving up. We can win this on November 8th, and the fight will have just begun. So we're going to fight to preserve marriage equality, same-sex intimacy, the right for Texans to be who they are, love who they want to love, and be with the person of their dreams. And then we're going to change the laws that are already on the books today. Though it's not okay and not all right by me, it's perfectly legal to fire someone in the state of Texas because they're gay. Though it's not okay and not all right by me, you can deny adoption of one of those kids in the foster care program to a gay couple in the state of Texas. We're going to make sure that we go on the offense, overturn those laws so that everyone can be who they're supposed to be, live to their promise in this state. They will be better, and we will be better for it. I have got your back. I'm going to fight for you day in and day out. We are going to win these battles. Thank you for being here.
This is going to be our last question.
Okay. Lois Dumont.
Hello, my name is David Bass, and I live here in the area. I'm deaf, and I have two critical issues that the deaf community have been facing for years. And that's, knowing that ADA has been established for so many years, and it doesn't benefit us. We still have underemployment for the individuals that are in the deaf community. And then the other issues we have is our educational system for our deaf kids. We should be equivalent and have the same intelligence as individuals who are hearing. So we're not dumb. We should be equal. Our parents are sending their kids to private schools so their kids can get equal education as a hearing child. They're getting the deplorable education, and I don't like that. We should be equivalent to the hearing students as well. And we don't need the pity. We don't need the pity. We need to be equivalent in employment. Deaf individuals are not getting jobs, which are similar to their hearing peers, because the assumption is that because they're deaf, they're dumb. And the only issues we have is communication. That's all it is. It's not related to our intelligence. They're fine. So many of them, they'll read our application, they'll say about 70% of individuals in the deaf community are not employable or they're underemployable. And it's always a struggle to make ends meet. I want to say probably about a couple of days ago, there was a deaf individual, a deaf guy asked me to assist him you know, with some things and trying to get an apartment because he couldn't maintain his bill because the rent keeps going up. And he's concerned that he's going to be evicted from his apartment. So it's sad. They can't get employed and get jobs where they're employable and make substantial enough paid for cost of living. And so deaf individuals have the ability to work as individuals who are hearing and receive the same pay, $7.25 an hour. That's not a living wage. It needs to be 15 or more like others. It's sad. And we're having this struggle, and we've had this struggle in our deaf community for so long. And ADA, the American Disability Act, has been in existence for over 30 years. So why are we still having this issue? I wanted to run for a public office in the Houston area, but there's so many hearing people I know that they couldn't see a deaf individual in a political office. So I figured I would lose, you know, they would look down on me and think that I'm not capable. I don't like the word can't. I want you to know that we can do it. We can run for political office. You know, I'm a deaf individual and that's it. But it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And, you know, to get those individuals to vote for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. There's a lot that I want to say in response to what you just shared with us. The first is, you don't know if you're not going to win if you don't run for office. So I hope that you do run for office. Love to hear what your platform is. I know that you're going to fight for other people who've been overlooked, who've been forgotten, who've been left behind, who've been counted out. And we all want someone who's going to fight for all of us. So if you're willing to do that, tell me about it, and I want to learn about your campaign. That's the first thing. The second thing, you're absolutely right. We just celebrated the 32nd anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And yet 32 years later, we still have yet to enforce the Americans with Disabilities Act. I mentioned earlier discrimination against the LGBTQ community here in the state of Texas. We have to make sure that every single one of us is free from any kind of discrimination, regardless of any differences between us, including those who are deaf in the state of Texas. Third thing, you're absolutely right. You cannot work just one job on $7.25 an hour. You need 2 or 3. That's why you and I are going to fight together for $15 an hour as the floor, below which no one will be working in the state of Texas. So that if you work hard, it's just one job. Focus on your family. Put that roof over your head. Make sure that there is food on the table. Lastly, you mentioned schools. And I want to make sure that at a time that our schools are so underfunded and our school teachers are not receiving enough to not have to work a second or third job. And average per pupil funding in Texas is down $4,000 against the national average. And we also have a governor who's threatened to take our public tax dollars out of our classrooms, turn them into vouchers, and send them to private schools. That we fight for full funding for public education and for full funding for every student, regardless of the differences between them in public education. Lastly, we're not going to make this policy without you. You must be at the table. As you and others have told me, no decisions about us without us. So if you're willing to work with me, I would love to be your partner in the governor's office in Austin, Texas, to make sure that you are doing everything that you can with what you have, where you are, right here in the state of Texas. Thank you so much. Maryland, Houston, Texas, Harris County, thank you for having us out. Les agradezco, muchísimas gracias, y nos vemos la próxima vez. Thank you so much for coming out. Adios.